welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Jose Barrera. He's a facial plastic and reconstructive surgeon in private practice in San Antonio, Texas. And his practice includes the Texas Center of Facial Plastic and Laser Surgery, the Rejuve MD Face and Laser Spa, as well as the Endermere Sleep and Sinus Institute. So we'll talk more about that. Now, Dr. Barrera is Stanford Fellowship trained. He's authored more than 70 publications and has won many awards for his outstanding research to advance the fields of facial plastic surgery, as well as sleep medicine, and is very active in several medical societies, which is how I know him. Now, he holds research grants with Stryker LLC to advance minimally invasive nasal surgery and sleep outcomes for patients with nasal valve reconstruction. Dr. Barrera has participated in many humanitarian missions around the world, and he's a decorated military surgeon with 30 years of service in the United States Air Force. Dr. Barrera, welcome to Beauty and the Biz.
Thank you, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I have to ask about the Air Force. I knew you were in there, but I had no idea it was 30 years. So can you just tell us more about that? That's amazing.
You know, it's been a great run. Served 34 years. I joined in '89, back when there was a Cold War. And soon after that, in 1990, my first year out, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and the world changed. And I was there to experience and just learn from my mentors and leaders in the military. And 34 years later, I just retired last month. And so it's been a great run. I was blessed enough to do everything I wanted in the Air Force. So no complaints.
One thing I've heard about when you're in the military, you get so much experience because everything's coming at you. Would you agree?
That is so true. So yeah, you know, it's very interesting because I did my otolaryngology training in Colorado, University of Colorado, and then I served in Tokyo, Japan for 3 years. That was my first assignment. And really, as an otolaryngologist there, my main focus was to take care of beneficiaries, to take care of all the troops. And so I would do missions to the northern tier of Japan. I was a flight surgeon, so I booked my own flights. I'd fly in a Learjet. The Air Force would fly me in a Learjet to do rhinoplasties and tonsillectomies in the northern tip of Japan because there was nobody there. And I just took care of beneficiaries in active duty in Japan and Korea. And then after that, they sent me to do a double fellowship at Stanford, and I was just thrilled to do that. And so, of course, I call it my third fellowship in Afghanistan. Because that's a whole different level than anything that you could train for. Just completely different than any training you could ask for. So it was an amazing experience. But yeah, 34 years later, I got a chance to retire, so I'm happy with that.
But I've seen you for years. Like you've been speaking at the medical conferences, like I have. This time, were you with the military?
Yeah, so from '89 till 2012, I was active duty or in training. So that was a long time, right? And then 2014, I got a chance to separate from the military. And between that 2012 to 2014 era, I got a chance to be the chairman of otolaryngology and facial plastic surgery over at Brooke Army Medical in Wolford Hall, and even a small stint leading the VA here in San Antonio. And then in 2014, I was able to get out of active duty and start private practice. So it's been a great time.
Okay, so that everyone likes to talk about their transitioning, and that's a big one. To go from the military to the private sector must be monumental. Can you just tell us about that? Like, what made you take the leap, and how'd you do it?
Yeah, no, that's great. So I was. So it's interesting because my first 3 years I was solo, and then I did my 2 fellowships. Then I went to academics, but academics in the military. And I remain in academics, and I'm still in what I call private MX. So I made the jump from full-time military to private, and full-time academics to what I call private MX, sort of private practice academics, which I can talk to you a little bit about that too. It's fun. So military transition. So I started making that transition in that 2012 year, whereby I had friends, everybody has friends, hopefully, who you can share practices with. My friends who are facial plastic surgeons, in Houston, would ask me to go to Houston and do craniofacial, maxillofacial jaw surgeries, mostly for like people with sleep apnea, because they were doing all the cosmetics. And so I drive down to Houston, and I was moonlighting during 2012 to 2014 while running the department in the military. And so I had off-duty employment approval, and so I was able to do that and transition. So I didn't have a lease, I didn't have staff, I didn't have overhead. I just go down to Houston for those 2 years, and I would do these complex operations. I'd round up my patients, and I would transfer the care over to my 3 buddies who were facial plastic surgeons prior Navy, and they were all in private practice in Houston. And then I'd come back to San Antonio, do my active duty time. So during those 2 years, I was able to establish a entity, Endermere, out of Houston, which is a reconstructive LLC focusing on maxillofacial surgery and sleep apnea surgery. So then in 2014, I decided it was time to leave active duty. And I'd done my time as a chairman, and it was a busy 70-person department, so a lot of people to take care of, and decided to make a jump to private practice. At that point, because I was known for maxillofacial surgery and the sleep surgery and facial plastic surgery, I ended up actually leasing some space from a cosmetic prosthodontist. So the prosthodontist in town in San Antonio, his name is Jeff Rouse, really nice guy, and his wife's a cosmetic dentist. And so I ended up just leasing space from them. Beautiful practice, mostly cosmetic dentistry and cash-based. And so that allowed me then to jump from my military practice, full-time academics, to a private practice, whereby I had decreased overhead, but still a beautiful practice and a high-value clientele patient base, right? And so I stayed with Jeff really for 3 years and just seeing patients out of his office. I established a second entity, which is my Barrera Plastic Surgery Entity, LLC. And I also established a research company. So you got to go with me on this. The research company, I actually started while I was at Stanford 2011, and then further it in San Antonio and based it out of San Antonio. And so then in 2014, I decided to make a leap to full-time private over at the prosthodontist's office, and I had 3 entities going: my reconstructive practice out of Houston, my cosmetic practice out of San Antonio, and my research company. And at that time, I had outgrown the space. I went from a 2-room office to a 3-room office to a 4-room office, 1,500 square feet. And I had 1 office for the staff and myself. And I had 6 employees, and we're just running all over each other, just on top of each other. So people weren't happy. They needed space. I needed space. My patients needed space. So I went across town and bought a 1-acre property in the medical center area, kind of North San Antonio, in what's called Chavano Park. And it's just dirt. And so I began to develop that over the next 3 years. And in 2017, I opened up the Texas Center for Facial Plastic and Laser Surgery in this new location. So a lot of transition, but the key points, I think, is moving from military to private, academics to private, and in that time frame, keeping my overhead low, keeping my employee census low, and saving money to develop a plan to build a bigger center.
Do you feel like it was, because it sounds like you have 4 different profit centers. Does that feel like that was um, a lot to control at the beginning? Like, do you wish you had just focused on, let's say, facial cosmetics, and then maybe later on add some more recon, or start with recon and add a little cosmetic later, and then, but you were already heavy in the sleep apnea, so it's very difficult to do all of that. How are you focusing, or how are you prioritizing?
That's right. I mean, I would say that really for the first 10 years of practice, military practice, I was doing everything. I was doing orthodontic cases. I was doing craniofacial. I was doing a lot of trauma. So I had a heavy reconstructive practice. But I was also chief of facial plastic surgery. So I was doing all the cosmetics. Me and a army partner of mine, we were doing all the cosmetics. But I was doing a lot of aging face. But because I was in the military, I had the advantage of I had full access to the oral surgery department. So if I needed to make a mold or a cast or run models and virtual plans and make splints, I had my own lab. I had the oral surgery lab. They just free access. I just had my own station. And then same thing for lasers. I had full access to the dermatology department. There's zero competition, right? There's no financial incentive. So I played around 6, 7 different lasers. I was in the oral surgery department. I was doing cosmetics. I was doing recon. So it was a fruitful time. My first 10 years out of practice were very fruitful. And then, of course, I deployed to Afghanistan. That was a whole different experience doing, um, you know, regional flaps and so-free tissue and a lot of craniofacial, a lot of clefts and microtia and burns. So a lot of that stuff and doing medical missions. So the first 10 years of practice was just great because I could just dabble and do a lot of things. If I had not had a military commitment, I would have wanted to go out and do recon, honestly, because I enjoyed reconstructive practice. At the same time, though, I really enjoyed cosmetic surgery. And so I think it's very hard to develop both simultaneously. But coming out, already having 10 years of experience, already being boarded, and I did 3 specialties. I already was known in my town. I was already speaking, right? I was already teaching. I already knew what I knew. What I didn't know is how to run a private practice. And so just being in an orthodontist's office, getting a little exposure, a prosthodontist's office, getting a little exposure, and seeing how they did it, just gave me a little inkling of private practice. And then I just got a taste of it as I started slowly. I think it was important for me to develop these entities, these profit centers, you would call them. I would call them entities, because one, unlimited liability perspective, I can segregate my insurance people on one side and yet be able to do my cosmetic patients in the other entity. And then if I see you and you're like, Dr. Barrera, can you do my septoplasty at the same time as my rhinoplasty? Sure, we do it all the time. Would you take my insurance? Sure, I'm happy to. And so I developed these contracts already with these insurance companies, right? Because I had that transition period. And then from having clean books, I see you for the functional under the endomere practice. I see you under cosmetic, under Barrera plastic surgery. The books are clean. Thank God I've never gotten audited. When you see me as a patient, you have 2 sets of notes. You have your functional reconstructive note. You have your cosmetic note. We don't mix them. You have your med spa notes. Everything's very separate. It's more work. I pay more taxes, for both entities, fine. It means we're making more money on both entities. In addition, we have a higher accounting, right? So our books of businesses are a little bit more, there's more to account for. It's fine. It's also a way for me to be able to see which profit centers more effective, more cost effective, which is more profitable. How do I place some employees on one side versus another? And then the research company is a whole different thing. The research companies allowed me to really be involved in clinical trials. Right now, I'm finishing a clinical trial for a neurostimulation company. I'm doing another feasibility trial for a laser company. I did the Stryker and TELUS Latera trials, developed and got a patent on sleep MRI. develop tracheal bypasses devices and or tongue retaining devices and nasal valve implants. And so there's been a lot of, that's a fruitful aspect of the practice. So I have a fellow, and so I always have some kind of research base, like real research going on with trials and letters of intent that we have to write and grants. So it keeps the practice really buzzing all the time.
Out of curiosity, can you tell me which is the most profitable, and which takes up most of your time?
A great question. So the plastic surgery practice is the most profitable by far. The plastic surgery practice is also 80% of my patients coming in. We mainly do on the surgical aspects. On the surgical side, we do facelift, rhinoplasty, and blepharoplasties. Those are the top three things that we do. On the non-surgical, the med spa side, it's neurotoxins, fillers, and lasers. We have 7 different laser systems. So we were a flagship, we're a major skincare company. Now we decided to move away from that, but we have a full med spa with estheticians and so on. The reconstructive practice is not as profitable, but it is, I believe in being affable, available, and affordable. Sometimes, I think in our field, we get away from some of those things. Availability is a big deal. So we're available to our referring docs and providers. We're available to patients. So I don't mind seeing 30, 40 patients a day. We always want to be nice and pleasant and give you that Ritz-Carlton experience. We have a beautiful 10,000 square foot practice. It's a big practice. And we also price things at a level where we're not out of reach for our market. And it doesn't mean that we're doing any less of the standard of care or the most innovative and sexiest surgeries out there. We are on the cutting edge of everything we do, but we don't need to charge as much as others because we want to be available, affordable, and affable. So part of that is patients want to come in. They're like, hey, I have this problem, right? And it's part reconstructive, part cosmetic, and we're willing to do that for the patient, right? We're willing to bill the insurance. Yes, we don't make as much when we bill out to the insurance companies. At the same time, the patients see the value in that. So we may see maybe more patients than others. So
I coming from a professional perspective, I look at that and I say, okay, it's very difficult to juggle both.
Yes.
And you're juggling actually more of that. You've got the facial plastics, which is lovely, and 80% of your business is that, but you're also seeing 30 to 40 patients a day.
Yes.
That is brutal. I mean, of an aging, especially an aging face patient, they're like me, pain in the neck, very impatient, want service. And it's how are you juggling that so they feel like they don't even need a 5-star. They just want to be seen within, 10 minutes. Can you pull that off? Or do you find that a challenge?
So we work as a team. This is part of that affability aspect, right? So the patient comes in and it's a beautiful office. Before the patient comes in, they're being contacted. We have a funnel system. I have a patient care coordinator reaching out to them even on the weekends, right? So I actually use one of your, I believe she did a little tutelage with you, Anna Bainbridge, I'm not sure, I believe so. We trained a little bit with you. Anyway, I used a consultant to find my patient care coordinator. Because we could talk about that too, but I've been through a few people over the years, right? I've been doing this for 21 years. I used to run a big department. So it starts with a funnel, getting them in and giving them that customer service. Patients automatically need that, right? They need that contact right away, reach out to them, be available. And so part of that is having appointments available. I'm doing 8 to 12 new consults a day, but that doesn't mean that I'm seeing my follow-ups. I'm still seeing my follow-ups at a week, at a month, 3 months, 6 months in a year. My facelifts, I'm seeing a day, 3 days, 7 day, a month, 3 months, 6 months in a year. So a lot of people are coming in. And so I need to be available. Henceforth, if you have a busy practice, you can't just see 12 people a day. You're not going to have, I believe it's going to be difficult. Sure, you can run a practice that's a Instagram, social media heavy, people flying in. You're always on social talking about your procedures, and you're not going to do a lot of follow-ups because they're coming from out of town. That's not my practice. My practice, I reach from all over the country, but I reach from people from 4 hours away. Mostly, I would say probably 60, 70% of people are within 4 hours. And so they're coming in, I need the appointment times. And I have a fellow. So how do I manage this? The way I manage it is this way. So I'm a fellowship director. I'm on my 8th fellow now. They've been great. It's been a really fruitful thing for the practice and for the fellows. So the fellows, they want to be busy. They want to see reconstructive patients and they want to see cosmetic patients. But they're not going to see their cosmetic patients by themselves. Those are patients that I see, that I spend time with. The fellow spends time with the reconstructive patients. They get introduced as an associate to the practice. I go in and I check, I see the patient briefly, lay out the plan with the fellow and the patient, and the fellow goes on and sees those recon patients. I then go in and see my cosmetic patients. I see my cosmetic patients with my patient care coordinator. And so the patient care coordinator and she'll get the plan at the consultation. Following that, I walk out, so that could be 20 minutes, no less than 20 minutes with a new patient. I draw everything out, I make a plan. I said, this is probably going to be your 80, 90% plan. And we review that. And I tell them, this is not the last time you're going to see me. So then I walk out, the patient care coordinator steps in. They've already met her. Next, my MA comes in, that's photography. Next comes in my esthetician, goes over the skincare regimen and the post-op care, pre and post-op care. Next, the patient care coordinator closes. Patient spends an hour with us minimum. They don't feel like they haven't seen us or had any less experience. And so I have 750 five-star reviews. It's not about reviews. Been doing this for a little while, but the experience has been consistent. And patients come in and tell me all the time, they say, yeah, your reviews are amazing. I came in to see you. Your gallery is amazing. I have 1,000 before and after patients in my gallery. I've been doing that for 21 years. So patients, before they come in, they already have an idea of who they're going to see. The story's on the website. The patient gallery is quite fulfilled in every category. They've been reached on the funnel. They already know us by reputation or by research. They're already seen what kind of work I do. They come in and then we're willing to work with them, right? Rhinoplasty patient comes in. We're willing to work with them. Yeah, we'll do that under your insurance. That's fine. We'll take it, and we'll do the cosmetic rhino. Oh yeah, aging face patient comes in. Yes, we'll do. We're not charging $200,000, $80,000 for facelifts. We're doing preservation deep plane facelifts. We're doing deep plane facelifts, extended deep plane facelifts, short scar facelifts, deep neck lifts. We're doing it all. We're doing all the aging face. We're doing all the cutting edge stuff. But they're not paying what they may be paying elsewhere. So they're seeing real value there. Patients know what the value is. Maybe I should charge more and see less patients. But it wouldn't really meet my available, affable, and affordable type of dogma. Sure. I mean, I'm 53. Maybe we should see less and do less. You can. Or become social media stars. You can do that too. But we decided to go this route and be more of a destination location.
Gotcha. A couple thoughts about that. Regarding the building, I just have to, you did a build out, right? From the dirt up?
From dirt. Yeah.
Okay.
No water, nothing here, just dirt.
All right. Give us some tips about how was that, by the way? How was your experience? Because I've heard like tough, yeah, that can be really tough. So any tips on how to do a build out?
Yeah, I think you got to take it in chunks. Uh, I don't recommend building the whole thing out. When I first started, I decided to just lay out the buildings. I have two buildings. I just decided to lay out the two buildings, and I had in mind to do like 10,000 square feet. And so I laid out 5,000 square feet. I needed a place for the OR, which is a quad A. I needed the reconstructive practice on one side and the plastic surgery practice on the other. So it's divided by nurse's station, and I needed my research practice upstairs and offices, admin offices upstairs. So I just did a 5,000 square foot chunk, but I built out 6,500 square feet in the first building and 2,600 in the next building. So that was a cost savings to have some fortuitous planning who the lady sends out. I use the same architect. I use the same structural engineer. So, and then the MEP varied, but I was very involved with the design layout. I built it on an acre with 44 parking lots, but room for expansion for more parking spaces. So that was 2017. We got in the building, and we continued till 2021, and then I decided to build out the med spa. The med spa got built out because I brought in a plastic surgeon who was dedicated to body plastics, 30 years experience. And so I built out the med spa so she could run her practice through the med spa and through my second floor. And so then I had a tenant. And that continued until she retired. And then at that point, I decided to convert the space into full med spa skincare center, a very posh kind of center, but it was already built out for the plastic surgeon. So I just really not much changed except just to take over the med spa as its own space.
Has the med spa been a good feeder to your surgery?
I would say, my practice is mostly surgical. I think there are folks out in our community that are very successful at launching and growing a medical spa and having multiple injectors and providers. Our med spa is Rejuve MD Med Spa and MD directed med spa. So I decided to follow a blue zone mentality. Have you heard of blue zones? So I rather go fishing in my own blue zone than go fishing with a bunch of med spas in a blue zone that everybody's fishing for the same, right? So my bait is a little bit bigger because I'm pulling surgeries. And then it's a Rejuve MD med spa, so then I have a patient relationship. I guess our practice is more relationship based, right? So the goal is to build patient relationships that will be enduring and endearing such that it'll lead to further surgery down the line. And so our med spa presence is really 10 to 15% of the practice. I've had my hand in having nurse practitioners and PAs be injectors. And I found that unless I say I'm no longer injecting, it's hard for them to be independent, because I always have the legacy patient coming in and saying, no, Dr. Barrera is going to inject me, right? And so I focus it on the MD directed kind of laser and injectables. And so I'm not feeding from the same pond. I'm sort of fishing in a bigger lake. That's my own blue zone for surgery, if you will. Other folks do very well in having, 3, 4, 5, my colleagues, injectors in the practice. They've stopped injecting. They only do surgery. And that's great. I think that's a nice model. I just not been successful at hiring and keeping successful injectors that can stay in their zone, and be able to still derive a lot of catch. Because we have so many med spas around my area. My area is inundated with med spas, right? And even though I'm even less expensive in my neurotoxins than they are, patients don't know any difference, and I'm not ever going to Groupon or discount. So it's. I'd rather be in a blue zone right now until I could find. I'm open to the idea of a great nurse injector or PA. If you have any, let me know. But it's can they build a practice in this blue zone?
Well, and eventually there'll be a balance there. You will get to the point where you do want to just do surgery, typically. I will just say typically, but you're still young and vibrant, so there's no big hurry right now. But when you get ready to grow or scale, how do you do that? Because there's only so much of you. You really do need to count on others. But that means you also have to build a culture and be a killer leader, because you have to, you really have to know what's going on, who's representing you, and are they representing you the way you think they are? So that takes leadership and culture and all of that. But it sounds like you're doing fine. How many staff do you have?
We have 12 staff.
Okay,
So
that's plenty.
it's very interesting you say scale, because I think we're all following this model over the last 3 to 4 years that the goal is to exit and derive half of your revenue from the med spa. This is what I'm, so, I'm just going to segue into this briefly, because this is a trend, and I'm not sure how successful of a trend it's going to be. I have a different idea of scalability. And scalability doesn't mean that we become successful med spa surgical centers, because that's actually a model that's very popular and it's a successful model. I'm doing it a little bit different. And I've always had a surgical model. So what we are doing currently is I started with a quad A SF OR in 2017. Now, I told you about the first building. I took that other building that was 2,600 square feet. I blew out 4 walls, and I'm adding 2 more ORs and overnight stay and 6 pre-op PACU bays, and the ability to expand to 2 additional ORs, which would bring us from, we're currently 1, we're adding 2 more, so we'll be at 3. We may add 2 more, which would be 5. That's a different scalability. I brought in a hospital partner. Now we're going kind of old school, right? We're kind of going to pre-med spa, pre-2020s, pre-COVID, where surgeons focus on surgery and scale their models with physician-owned surgical centers. That's something that was very common with the ASC model, was actually more commonplace in the hospital setting until the Obamacare plans eliminated physician-owned hospital ownership. But that doesn't mean you can't do this at the ASC level. So we decided to scale with a hospital partner in an ASC setting, which allows you to scale in different ways. You don't have to rely on a purely cosmetic practice. You can do a reconstructive practice. You can bring in more surgeons and still be able to share ownership interest within a surgical center. That's sort of pre-COVID thinking. It's not a bad way to scale. And I would almost say to you, which I don't know because not many people have done it this way, that the profitability in ASC-based surgical centers, which are both cosmetic and reconstructive, may be more profitable than a med spa ownership trying to sell to PE based upon your EBITDA.
Maybe. I think, frankly, I'm glad you bought the building. That's your real asset. So you being the landlord, frankly, you get to hold the cards. I will say, though, those who have built out those big ORs, they didn't realize how difficult it is to get other surgeons to use that facility in the way you want them to. they'll crush you with all their requests and all the new equipment they need, and they need something different than you offer, and they need better blocked hours than you want to give them, and it goes around and around. It's tough. And do they come in as are they just renting? Are they building? Are they throwing in some equity? That's that's a big mountain to climb.
It is a big mountain. I would say, that's why I ended up moving with a hospital partner in
Yeah.
that separate entity. It's a
Yeah.
separate entity altogether.
I think that's a great idea.
The other four entities that I'm running, but it's a separate profit center whereby we have a COO, we have a CEO, we have a CFO, we have, a separate books of businesses and separate liability and separate structure and separate space. And so it's a traditional model. And it's not for everybody. Certainly not for cosmetic based only. If you try to run that as I'm going to just cater to cosmetic surgeons, you're catering to what you said, and that is block times and my equipment starting when I want to start and ending when I want to, and my staff versus your staff. We're doing away with all that by having we're professionalizing the surgical center. So they don't, I may be part owner, right? But I don't have to deal with them, with other users. They're users of the entity, and they may become partners, all right? And then we're partners in this entity, but we also have a hospital partner, which does the administrative work. Because I'm busy enough on this side, so it's a different model. So let me ask you, Catherine. So you've seen in the pre-COVID years, we've seen an explosion of private equity. And the idea is, hey, get your med spa as busy as possible, because if you're a solo doc or if you have 2 or 3 docs, it's not enough, because the patients are following you. Once you leave and retire, there's no practice. So you need to get your med spa busy to 50% of your practice, and then it's worth something based upon your EBITDA. That seems to be the model that is being touted and transitioned to. Do you think that's a sustainable model?
We've talked a lot about PE on this podcast, and frankly, I was a lot more excited about it last year than I am this year. That boat might have already floated. It's very, very difficult to transition from one surgeon to another, for sure. So everyone said, no, you just need predictable and reliable revenues. That's what the VC people are going to buy. They want predictable revenues that they can grow and use scales of economy to cut costs. And frankly, I'm not seeing the math. I'm not. You want to walk away, not walk away. You know how they say the 1 and 2 apple bites,
The second bite of the apple.
Yeah, frankly, you better get the first bite of the apple, because the second bite is a whole bunch of ifs. If this all works out, if the staff doesn't completely hate you and leave, if. So I'm not as, have you heard Warren Buffett talking about PE?
No, tell me.
He's not a big fan. The people who get rich are the ones who started it right at the get-go, like everything else, So there are just so many ways to do this. Frankly, I think you're the landlord. You own the building. Never, never, never let that go. I think that's your best asset. The rest, I think, is gravy. And you're only 53. You have plenty of time to go. But frankly, you're going to be in the position to decide, what do you like to do? If you like to do recon. But you have the freedom to decide, I want to do aging face and I want to do recon as well. But then you've got to balance the patients and also the marketing overhead, because in your area, don't you have a ton of military? So if there were a war, doesn't half your state leave?
Well, that would assume that, make the assumption that half the state is military, half of Texas is military. There are a lot of guns in Texas, that is true. But I would say, it's very segmented in my area. So we have the premier, level 1 trauma hospital in San Antonio, Brooke Army Medical Center. And it is there. And I used to be the chairman there. And we have 24 OR starts. And that was my goal, is to start every OR every day 5 days a week. And we had 2 dedicated trauma ORs that spun 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the practice. So, but even that major reconstructive hospital has struggled because of staffing issues to be able to run 24 OR starts. So much so that a lot of surgeons are moonlighting just to keep up their credentials. So you have the patient population, but you just don't have the staffing. And like you said, it comes down to leadership, right? So I think that's part of it, as you mentioned. The second aspect of it is that my catchment is like 4 hours, right? So people reach out to me from 4 hours away, whether you fly in or you drive in, it's about a 4-hour catchment area. So I stay plenty busy with that catchment area because I'm doing things that my colleagues don't do. And it's not all recon, it's only 20% recon, it's 80% cosmetic, but I'm available. And then the third aspect of that is that from a profitability perspective, right? Certainly the cosmetic practice carries the whole kit and caboodle. But when COVID happened, and we had to shut down our cosmetic practice, the recon practice kept going because people still needed care. We hit a recession. We're already hitting post-COVID profitability numbers. What would you say, Catherine, is the average loss in profit from 2022 to 23 and 23 to second quarter 2024? Have you seen a marginalization of profit revenues across our industry?
The issue is the numbers are so skewed because how you were doing before COVID was one thing. Then there was COVID and you died. Then post-COVID, you had your killer surge. And you guys started believing that was the benchmark. I said, no, that was an event that you should just be grateful for, but don't count on that to stay. And now I get calls all the time saying, I'm down 30%. And I said, from what? From the surge or from your normal,
That's right.
So the
That's
whole thing
right.
got so skewed, and I don't think we're back yet. That's why it's so hard to say what should it be. Like in the old days, I used to say, you know what, if you can pull off a 45, 50% profit margin, good for you. And then in today's world, I say, I don't know, 30 to 35%, because it's uber competitive. The advertising costs are so out of control. The patient trends are so bizarre, like things have changed so much. So I've just learned to stay adaptable and just say, what works in your area, because it is very segmented towards, and I didn't mean to say the whole state of Texas. I meant San Antonio. I believe it's a very military area. So you
Yeah.
can hire staff and they're coming and going so fast because the husband got deployed or they got deployed or whatever. And I think, dear God, how do you run a business? Like,
And most of my business is non-military. There's plenty, we have 3 facial plastic surgeons over at the military hospital. I go and teach every year, and they don't need any more facial plastic surgeons there. In fact, I take TRICARE, but I take TRICARE Select for retirees because I know TRICARE Prime active duty. They always have BAMC and Wilford Hall. They have their providers there. They don't need me. They need me to teach the residents at times for certain things that I do. They ask me to teach, but they don't. That's only because I've been asked to give a certain lecture. But they're highly qualified, well-trained surgeons. They don't need me, so they don't need anybody in the civilian sector. So they're in an independent party, independent entity, almost like a closed system. Right, almost like if you had a Kaiser Permanente
right.
town, it's an HMO. You go to Kaiser Permanente. You're not going to go outside Kaiser Permanente. So in regards to that idea of this going back to, are we pre-COVID, are we post-COVID? What numbers should you be reflecting? I think that the idea of PE, if you got into it early enough. And I danced around with 3 different companies and got an LOI from one company. And I was delighted to get the LOI and grateful that they would offer that to me. They didn't want everything. They wanted the reconstructive practice. They wanted the cosmetic practice. Those are profitable. They wanted the quad A. They didn't want the research company. Even though a research company was very profitable, but they didn't want that because that wasn't in their wheelhouse.
They wouldn't know how to manage that.
It's not in their wheelhouse. But okay, so think about it. Let's say I accepted that LOI last year. Now this year. And the LOI was based on last year. But they want you to produce at that level. Well, you can't squeeze more juice out of the orange. The orange is the orange. You can't squeeze more juice out of it. PE is not going to make you squeeze more juice. I already have a PEO. I already have 401k retirement plans. We have our own HR. We already have our own administration. They weren't going to squeeze any more juice out of our practice. So now you're left with, well, what am I doing now? 2024. There'd be a lot of pressure. And another PE company that I had some high-level talks with, they've gone bankrupt already. So now you sell your entire practice with your idea of a second bite of the apple, and you haven't even gotten the first bite, right? And so I think that it's a great idea. I think PE will have a place, but PE is really what? It's an MSO. A PE is just an MSO. They've always been around. We've just, we just put a little lipstick on the same pig and called it a PE and called it cool names. There's some cool PE names out there, and hyper specialized it in cosmetic surgery. They've been around in dentistry a long time. They've been around in ophthalmology and other specialties a long time. They know what they're doing. And frankly, I would be in the dark as far as how they would run my practice. And I'd just be an employee. And I couldn't squeeze more juice unless, I got some kind of approval from them, or they changed things otherwise, or they fired a bunch of my people and eliminated a bunch of my services. Right. And it doesn't go with our model, with our branding, with our.
Especially at your stage, to give up that kind of control at this stage, you have way too much life left in you. It's not like you're even thinking about walking away. I think you have a money-making machine there. I don't know why you would mess with it if you don't have to. I would say dig in deeper and do your own thing. Like, make your money-making machine even go from good to great. Get really good at the staff, get really good at processes, get killer at patient attraction, retention, conversion, and retention. Like, just go deeper instead of looking for that quick exit,
That's right. And I agree with you. Now, I always think about, the fellows coming out, because I train fellows, and I see some of my friends that they've been very successful building 100% cosmetic practice straight from the get-go. And they're riding really the tails of two things, post-COVID boom and marketing, social media marketing. And so if you're beholden to social media marketing as a way for patient acquisition, and I do social media marketing. I have marketing company and a separate social media company. So two different companies that help me with that. And so I'm there, but I'm not there every day saying, hey, I'm in the car recording videos. Today I saw blah, blah, blah. No, when I'm in the car, when I listen to music, talk to my wife, say, I'm coming home for dinner. What are we doing tonight?
How many hours a week are you spending on social media?
How many hours a week am I spending on social media?
Yeah.
As a content creator, I would say I'm probably, as a content creator, I'm probably spending 2 hours a week.
Yeah. As
a content creator. As a content user, if you look at my stats, I probably, I play around and scroll for fun, maybe 2 to 3 hours per week.
Yeah.
But that's sort of like downtime, kind of like fun time.
but more for entertainment.
Yeah,
You
it's
know what?
insane.
Know thyself. It's not your thing. It's not going to be your thing. What you did smart was bring on people who it is their thing. And then but I would meet with them. I would talk about content, get them to make you famous, get them to figure this out. I love to do like have that person like following you doing the day in the life of a plastic surgeon and what you do. So that way you're not acting and you're not prepping and you're not practicing. You're just doing your thing and they make you look good.
And I have my PCC doing that. She's doing a little bit of that, just a little bit of here and there. We have so much before and afters and things, and you just got to mix it up. You can't just do before and afters, and you can't just do like, let me show you how I do surgery. You got to make it fun too, and
Right.
and show a little bit of the personal side, I believe.
By the way, can I ask what's your secret to getting approval for, especially facial plastics? It's difficult to get the approval from patients for before and after consents. Any secrets to doing that? Are you asking yourself, or do you have a process of some sort?
No, we do have a process. So when patients come in, after they see me, they get their photographs, and they get to elect whether or not to share photography with, and so they sign a consent form. It's electronic. It goes straight into the chart. So the consent form is always recorded electronically, whether they want to share or not share, right? And then as we go through the journey, the patient journey and the surgery and so on and so forth, we talk about the results, and if I'm doing, like, sometimes I'll do a rhinoplasty reveal, say patient was elated, say, would you mind, do you mind if we record this? And they'll say yes or no. They say yes, awesome. And so we'll record, and then I'll say, did you share? Because we recorded it, would you mind sharing it with other patients, patient education, and so on? And then we'll go on social and maybe our website, and they'll say yes or no. And so sometimes we'll convert some of those people that say no into yeses. And certain people, they're so happy, and they give you, a great review or whatever. I've gone away from asking for the review myself to having my patient care coordinator do it. One, I don't want to devalue what I did because I'm asking for a review, although it's probably more effective to get reviews. Like, I've got lots of reviews, 750 reviews that way. But I almost feel like, you know what, I'm your doctor. We're not here because I want to promote. It's about you. It's not about me, right? So, but my patient care coordinator can do that. She established a relationship. She contacted the patient through a funnel. She followed up with the patient. She got the patient booked. Fine. She can ask, and she does. And she's been very good at getting reviews, which is a thing that I'm delighted for, because it takes a little pressure off my day. I don't need to waste that amount of time explaining it. And so I think that's important to do as well, is couple, if you don't get a consent for photography, at least get a review.
Yep. Never leave empty-handed. Get something.
Get
Yep.
something.
Yep.
They're both good. Patients, I think, derive value in that, but we're very respectful. We try not to, they say black on my eyes, only show this. That's all we do.
Right. So with all of you built quite a little kingdom there. You have a lot going on. Give me just one of the biggest mistakes you made that others could learn from after growing from nothing to a lot.
Huge mistake, Catherine. I left the military, was going to go into academics, like university academics. And I got a bunch of offers, and that was fine. I was looking at it. And then in San Antonio, there was a hospital being built, physician-owned hospital. This is pre-Obamacare. You could do that. And the idea was, hey, listen, we're getting the top busiest 100 practices in San Antonio. Each of you are partners, Class A members. Within that partnership, we have 30 primary care that are going to refer to the surgeons, right? And we're going to build the Taj Mahal of hospitals. Has own Starbucks, free Starbucks for the staff, waterfall feature, private rooms with private nursing, with attached family rooms so the family could stay overnight in a separate and within the same suite, a separate room for the family, separate room for the patient. Beautiful, just marble and quartz and state of the art and robots and all the expensive stuff, private parking and personal chef and nice, right?
Right. I want it. Yeah.
I want it. Boom. That's my cosmetic practice, right? 100 referring doctors. We're all surgeons, 70 of us surgeons, 30 primary care. So I decided to not go into academics and go into private practice to join this private Ritz-Carlton experience, directed care practice. Well, the model was an out-of-network model. I didn't know. I was a military guy. I didn't know out-of-network models, blah, blah, blah. And so it wasn't sustainable on the insurance side. But the pro forma was an out-of-network model. Look at our profitability. They just veiled the fact that this was out-of-network and you're in-network.
Never trust a pro forma.
Nope. Mistake number one.
Yeah.
Mistake number two. I trusted that 70 surgeons who were partners, members, were going to take their cases to the hospital because it was a physician-owned hospital. The more you do, the more you make, the more we all make. Happy family. No, because everybody has some conflict, some tie, some this, some privileging, some OR, some block time. So I was the second busiest surgeon at the hospital. Took everything there. I was like, oh man, I'm taking everything. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain.
Yeah.
Third big mistake was that I eliminated my other options. I shut down the Houston practice, went 100% in, and I didn't have another place to go operate. I mean, I did, but I didn't. I put all my ducks in this, and so when that hospital went bankrupt, I was left with $275,000 in debt. Yeah. And starting out, that's a lot of money. Starting out, right? With nothing to show for it. Except, you write off your loss in that entity, but, it's still a loss, right? So I learned something. What did I learn? 3 things that I learned. Lesson number 1. Don't trust an out-of-network model. Read the pro forma, read the contract. What does Class A mean? What is your responsibility to the entity? What is the responsibility to you? What are withholdings? What is your, how long are you going to be committed? What's your non-competes? All that stuff. Know your contract. Lesson number 2, don't be fully vested in something that you have very little ownership. I own shares, but I didn't have ownership. I own shares of a operating company, not of a real estate company, to your point, right? So when the operations went bankrupt, I had nothing. I didn't have any real estate. I didn't have anything, right? The operations went bankrupt. I went bankrupt. Lesson number 3, don't build it for you. What your brand is, what your goals are, what your mission statement is. There, I was building it for them. I was building that brand. I was building that mission statement. I was building that group, but the group didn't show up. The biggest, the weekly discussion was like, who's going to come to this beautiful hospital? Where are my partners operating? And they weren't there.
So they built the Taj Mahal, but nobody showed up?
There were a few of us, maybe 12 of us. Yeah, because everybody was tied in. They wanted the investment, but they didn't want to show up for the commitment. When you build it yourself, you have the investment and the commitment.
And the drive to make it succeed. That was a very expensive lesson for you, and I'm sorry. I can only imagine the sleepless nights you had. But Didn't you learn a ton from that?
Fun.
Look what you created from that mess.
That's
Look what
right.
you have
That's
now.
right.
You never would have had that had this worked out. So I think it really always works out in the end. You know,
Yeah, no, we're blessed. We live in America. It's the land of opportunity.
right?
I got the chance to immigrate here, served 34 years in the military here, um, live live the dream. You know, still living the dream. Very blessed by God and by my family. My wife's been super supportive,
Thank
uh,
God. You
and
didn't
so
need that problem. So good. It's so nice to have a supportive family behind you. Oh boy.
huge. So who knows? What's your prediction, Catherine? Predict 2024 prediction, 1 year prediction, 5 year prediction.
For our industry,
Yes.
it's definitely going to consolidate because it's tough to be a private practice in today's world, to just be a solo practitioner. There's plenty of supply, and there's plenty of demand, but you have to be, until you understand that this is about the business and marketing side of surgery, you're going to lose because, and nobody wants to hear this, most of you are really good surgeons. Like most of you are really good surgeons. Some are extra good, like they've had the extra fellowships and the extra. But unless you're willing to go extra, you're just a surgeon like a lot of others are. So it's gotten much more competitive and much more confusing for the patient. That's why nowadays you almost have to enter in a specialized way instead of trying to be everything to everybody, because you don't have a marketing budget to reach out to everybody. So I just think you have to get so strategic in today's world because it's going to get tougher, more expensive, more regulated. And I'm sounding like it's doomsday, and I'm very sorry for that. I am doing my part to keep you all employed because I am all about this. That's the beauty of this. Thankfully, the consumer demand is insatiable. And you know what else works out for you? What I realized? Like, let's say Kardashians can make or break this industry. Like, I remember they all got the BBLs, and then
Yeah.
wasn't it funny? So then everyone got into the BBL world, and then Kardashians got rid of them because they were so ridiculous, and and then that's a whole other wave that you can ride. Or like Ozempic, it's terrible for
Yes.
liposuction,
Yeah.
but excellent for excess skin surgery. So it's always going to ebb and flow. There's always going to be pros and cons. And the best thing you can do in today's world is stay adaptable and open to the changes and see them coming, and don't be so blindsided. I think what happens is that's why we have to go to these conferences and talk to each other, because you don't realize what's coming if you haven't been paying attention, and you're like, oh, where did everybody go? What just happened? But nowadays, especially right now before the election, by the way, God bless America. I really hope everyone remembers how great America is. I have lived overseas at another country that was a third world, and I think we should. I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but I'm not loving what's happening with America. I think we have to remember the freedoms that we enjoy. I can do whatever the heck I want to do as a woman, as a whatever. It has never stopped me from doing what I want. I'm the only one who has stopped me. I dislike people dissing America because we have the freedoms, and I have every opportunity, and it's my own fault if I don't get where I'm going. Just saying.
So many have sacrificed for these freedoms. So I'm definitely thankful for like my military colleagues, service members.
For sure.
We sacrifice for those freedoms. So no, I'm completely in agreement with you.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap it up now. Can you just, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, and I highly recommend they check out what you're doing. You're doing something very interesting. You have a lot going on, but it looks like you're managing it very well. Congratulations to you. So I do know your website is Dr. Jose Barrera, and Barrera is BARRERA.com. And is there anywhere else they can check you out?
Yeah. The handle is at Dr. Jose Barrera. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr.
Oh, I
Barrera.
was going to say, if somebody wants to email me, they can. admin@drjosebarrera.com. I always respond. So
Excellent. All right. In between the 400 other things you're doing. All right. So everyone, that's going to wrap it up for us today. I appreciate you hanging in there and listening to us. And if you have any inclination to do so, I would love a review at Beauty and the Biz so we can grow our audience. And then if you've got any questions, feedback, or you want a strategy call with me, please go to my website at catherinemaley.com, or you can certainly DM me on Instagram at Catherine Maley, MBA. Thank you so much, and we will talk again soon. The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.